Factor. It's a podcast that's powered by the Singapore College of Insurance, where we decode the future of risk, innovation, and the ever-evolving world of insurance. I'm your host, Shalini, and today we're exploring a topic that I think is quite personal to everyone. Everyone has an opinion on it. You don't have to be an insider, and it's important across business, health, and insurance. The topic is health and well-being 2.0, beyond hospital bills to prevention and mental well-being. Health insurance is no longer about what happens after illness. The conversation is expanding into shaping healthier lives, workforce resilience, as well as the broader role that insurers can play in shaping healthier lives and more sustainable system. You know, people talk about how everyone's living longer, but are we living healthier? So they talk about the lifespan versus the health span. So where is that, right? So to unpack that very important topic, I'm joined by two illustrious guests today. First, we have Ms. Sejal Mistry, Managing Director at Crowell Global Advisors. And joining her, we also have Dr. Hsien-Hsien Lei, CEO of AmCham Singapore. So welcome to the Risk Factor podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making time. So maybe let's set the stage a little bit for the conversation that we have today. Big picture. Okay, for many people, health insurance is still associated mainly with treatment and financial protection when something goes wrong. So that perception of something goes wrong, insurance, but how can we move that conversation differently today, right? To a much bigger or broader angle towards prevention, better mental well-being, and well-being in a broad sense, right? So Sejal, from your lens, like strategic lens, regional, I know you're everywhere. All right.
Yes.
So you have an everywhere lens. Okay. So from your perspective, what do you see as that most fundamental shift that's taking place in health insurance today, and what is driving it?
Yeah. Thank you for that question, and thank you for having me. From what you laid out in the beginning, you've already alluded to some of the answer that I was about to give, and that's the expectation on health insurance is to do more. Originally, health insurance was there to kick in when you had an infrequent, unexpected, catastrophic illness, an accident, appendicitis, a heart attack. You go in the hospital, you go out. It's what we call an episodic event. Now what we know is that healthcare and the health needs of populations are very different. We're talking about chronic diseases. People are living longer, and that means they are more susceptible to longer-term conditions. And so we want people to live longer, but as you said, we want them to live healthier. And the expectations on insurance is to actually cover that entire health journey. I think the second thing I would also say in terms of changing expectations is that insurers were typically seen as claims processing machines, essentially. It's a financial transaction. It's a transactional relationship. I think now that they have to be accompanying the patient or the policyholder along that whole healthcare journey, they have to be invested in that journey. And so now more and more we're hearing insurance talking about being a well-being partner.
I like that. The well-being partner sounds so much better than when something happens to you, call us. No, so better, so good. That's it, Sejal?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. I think that wraps up really nicely about that broad perspective. Now, Shen, for you, sitting in the thick of things in the business community, now, why is this the right moment for organizations to think more broadly about health and well-being rather than treating it as just a benefits issue?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I should also add that I'm a public health scientist.
Oh.
So a lot of the lens through which I view what the business community can do in this space is also from an access perspective, from a healthcare perspective. So, it was making me smile when I was listening to Sejal talk, because do you remember that scene in the Incredibles movie where dad is actually an insurance person, right? And he's in his little cubicle denying people insurance.
Oh my God.
And I think that is the classic picture we have in our mind of people who we send in our claims, and they're basically just rubber stamping a denial.
Oh, I just had an event. Was it this week? We had an event last week, and I showed the clip on Rainmaker. Have you watched the Rainmaker, the John Grisham book? Same thing, right?
But
and they
that's
talk
exactly-
about, but that's not what
That's
it is.
the stereotype.
We are in the business of paying claims,
Yes.
right? Okay.
So I love this idea of being a well-being partner. Businesses are also thinking the same. I think when you ask what is the right moment or is this the right moment, actually the right moment was yesterday.
Yeah.
So I do think many businesses are thinking along those lines. They are starting to view the entire journey for their employees from them at home even. And typically businesses would think home is none of my concern.
Yeah.
The truth is, if people are not living well outside of the office, they're not going to come into the office being productive.
Correct.
We hear about things like absenteeism, presenteeism, all of that is intertwined. So businesses now are thinking about benefits beyond the workplace, which is hard, right? Because HR folks who are, handed this task, they're like, I don't know how to do this. And that's where the insurers must come in. I think insurers now must be much more creative about how to partner with businesses so that you can offer a gamut of services beyond just submitting your claim and getting your money, which is super important, I know. So the right coverage is really important, but the right offerings are also important. Things like having exercise incentives, those little points that you get that you can exchange for vouchers, the gamification of how you go about doing well-being and insurance policies. Those are all part of the creativity that we're seeing in the industry. And I'm sure there's much more that is being done. I just am super impressed with the willingness of insurers to think more broadly because the cost savings in the long term, when you keep people healthy, are recognized. There are little caveats to that as we can discuss. However, what is right is to keep people healthy and happy.
Very true. And you're right, like we see insurers really taking on, aging, how do we help people age gracefully, age well? I think age with dignity. We see a lot of wellness initiatives. I think you can see some insurers, they have, they partner with you in living healthier, living better. I think it's a sign of times, right? That we are embracing this upstream side of things rather than just looking at it when, as you say, the claim comes in.
I was going to actually say, this is the thing that has really shocked me in the last couple of years is insurers really getting on the prevention bandwagon. Because about 10 years ago and probably even longer, if you talk to insurance about prevention, screening, vaccinations, when we really talk about healthcare services, not my job, right? I'm here for, again, hospital catastrophic incidents. This is not in my remit. And the conversation has changed so much. So I'm already impressed that we're having this dialogue. And then we can get into, what is really meaningful in terms of prevention.
Exactly. It feels like the industry is moving from a reactive model to something much more continuous, much more human-centered. I think that's what it is. I think we have a sort of like a campaign running about how, insurance, it's more human than you think. Sometimes you're like, all you think about is that piece of claim or document. It's actually it's very much drives everything that we do, right? How do we help people? How do we build resilience, whether it's an individual, a business, a society, economic resilience? And I think that's what's really important. It's very much human-centered. And, especially when work, and your personal life, it's so intertwined. Yeah, so now let's go deeper into prevention. Yes. Okay. For years, healthcare and insurance systems have largely been built to respond after illness, as you mentioned. But increasingly, the conversation is shifting upstream. So, Hsien, to you, right? From an employer and leadership perspective, what does prevention look like today when we talk about workforce well-being? I know you touched upon it a little bit, but in just practical and meaningful ways, what would you want to see happening?
We've seen a lot of businesses start thinking about how do we keep our employees happier and healthier through preventing chronic diseases. And a large part of it is awareness and screening. So some of the businesses I think that are the most active would look for either insurance companies or hospital clinics, medical clinics, and even dental clinics to come in and do wellness talks. And that's very, very nice to see because when these folks come in, they're giving you the 101 of what you should be looking out for, how you should be taking care of yourself. I mean, dental work is another thing that many people neglect.
Yes.
They think, I'll just go in when I have some kind of pain. Actually, prevention of dental illnesses is also super important for your cardiac health.
Correct.
Yes.
And for other illnesses, so people don't realize that. So businesses that are strategic and systematic in understanding chronic diseases will then start planning, who do we need to have come in and educate our employees and have a little fun with it? Because I think everyone loves to show up when there's a nice lunch prepared.
That's true.
Or where there's some giveaways. I'm just saying that people are busy and you have to incentivize them to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
So having some kind of offering like that is important. Now, to get more practical and where you really have to put some money down is, if you have done the screening and people have high cholesterol, what is your responsibility as a business to provide coverage for someone who hasn't actually done enough damage, that they have a diagnosable serious illness like heart failure or a heart attack? We want to get to them when their cholesterol levels are starting to creep up. So then what is our responsibility? I think there is medication coverage, but then are we covering lifestyle changes? And so are we helping them look at gym membership if that is something that's useful to them? How do we help them to get, start eating healthy? Are we covering the cost of a dietitian? Those are things that sometimes get left out. So on the prevention side, I think businesses need to look at their plans or their own offerings. So I know there's flexi benefits that some companies offer. I think that's very helpful. One thing I might add in my own experience and observation in big companies is if you can make it so that people don't have to submit so many darn receipts.
So true. So true.
Right? Hey, can you just please just give it and trust that people will use it wisely because you have given them the support. So take your $500 every quarter or however much it is that you get, use it for dietitian support, use it for a Pilates class. Those are the kinds of things I think businesses sometimes are not granular enough about helping their employees plan for the use of their flexi dollars. Because whatever's written in your insurance, people will follow it. They will make sure they take advantage of it. Whatever's left out of it on the prevention side requires some systematic approach and possibly some consulting with, academics or folks who you are partnering with on the insurance side. What preventive measures actually help to make a discernible impact so that people don't journey onto having a diagnosis which requires some serious, expensive treatment?
Very true.
I think one thing I would like to add is in the workplace, what I would like to see, and I have seen in some instances, is the workplace bringing the healthcare into the place itself.
Yes.
It doesn't mean every day, but having really the policies in place that don't punish people when they have to take time off of work to get those checkups. Often, people are trying to straddle between home and school and kids and whatnot. So the easier you can bring, the prevention interventions, be it screening, be it vaccinations, closer to the workplace, I think will be important. It was very interesting. Several years ago, I lived in Korea and my husband worked for Samsung. And what Samsung had done is once a year, every year, they would have the entire employee base, which you might imagine in Korea,
It's
thousands
huge.
of people.
Yes.
Every employee and their spouse come in for a health checkup. And it was a day-long health checkup. They got the day off. And it was the most incredible thing ever. I, as a spouse, had a digital ID. And we went from room to room.
Oh.
And they had a mammogram. They had, blood tests, the lung test, et cetera, different things. But they said, you know what? We're going to make this as seamless as possible. It's almost mandated at that point when you have the whole day off. And we're taking care of you and we're taking care of your family. And so it was, several, maybe an hour or two. And you go through this whole process and then you get a big booklet of all your results and explanations for the results.
Very good.
And I was so impressed by that. Now, I'm not saying every company has the means or should be doing that. But to me, this is where you kind of put your money where your mouth is. Yeah.
I really love this because I was going to say that when you're bringing screenings into the office, there's a little bit of a peer pressure thing going on.
Yes, correct.
That if your colleague is going and you're not, why are you not going? And it doesn't
Yes.
even cost anything or it's minimal cost. The second thing is having a buddy to go with you when you're scared. Because
Correct.
I'm that type where I'm a little bit in denial. But if somebody says, hey, I went yesterday, I'll go with you if you want. I can recommend some place that you can go. Or just tomorrow, they're coming in to test everybody's blood pressure and cholesterol. Let's just go.
Yeah.
So if I had a buddy to go with me, I might not feel so scared. And the other thing I want to mention is there are organizations like the American Chamber of Commerce where every year we have organized a health awareness festival.
Oh.
So we bring in different member companies to do the screening on site at AmCham. And we also bring in remote, telemedicine folks who will come in and do vaccinations on site.
Okay.
So we have flu vaccinations, COVID vaccinations, we have screening for hearing and all sorts of things. So organizations like chambers, like trade associations, when your company's too small to organize something like
That's
that
nice.
on
So you help
site,
to convene.
let's bring everyone
everybody
together
in.
and offer the service.
Yes.
So we can partner between businesses to do something like
Very
that,
good.
right?
So, we do the same thing at our office. It's a small business. So it's a small company. We've got about 30, 40 people in the company. So we do the same thing, right? So I think last year we did a full health screening and everybody was like a bit worried to go. But you're right. You have a buddy, you go in, you go and check every different thing. And then we looked at, okay, how do we, everybody says they're very stressed and everything. Okay, so we did yoga every Thursdays. We go for walks. We eat quite a bit, but that's because, it's just an Asian thing, right? So everything centers around food because that's what brings everybody together. So this year, I think we did, for Women's Day, we did nail care and massages and adjustment. And so we thought, okay, let's do this every month because you sit in the office, posture's not great, you feel a little bit tense. So I think that good. So I think that helps also for employees to feel that their employer is with them in that journey, about wanting to ensure that they're healthy, they live healthier lives. It's not just about what I can get from you at work, right? Yes. So I think that conversation, I think there's a lot that we can do. But again, to everyone, they have their own price point. What is their budget? But I think you can really get creative in terms of what matters to employees. And I think the answer is talking to them about what's important to them, right? Sejal, I'm just going to come to you about, where do you see the biggest opportunity for insurers to support on the prevention side, right?
Yeah.
And what's practical, what's scalable, and what's relevant to customers?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. So first of all, I was very enthused that we're having this conversation about prevention last couple of years with insurers, and then the uptake and the sort of the rollout of digital tools often embedded in different insurance platforms. But I don't think people want to go to their insurance providers to do their step count or to monitor their sleep. There's a lot of tools, great tools out there and companies that provide it. And I think for me, what I would like to see is more meaningful value of where insurers could come in prevention. And to me, that's covering preventive health services.
I see.
So this is covering your screening, your vaccinations. Now, I understand, as Shan had alluded to, this is an upfront cost. This is kind of breaks your insurance model. This is not about insuring against an event that may or may not happen, but you're investing in people at the get-go. So hopefully, and if that person stays with you in that longer term journey, then you will have that ROI. You will make that upfront investment in health to prevent them from being hospitalized later or from having those conditions and needing medication. But I know this is a very different mindset for the insurance industry in general. And I think then, of course, at the end of the day, and you know better than I do, for the insurance industry, the math has to work out.
Yes, exactly.
But someone's got to do that math. And I think people will start seeing the insurance industry differently if they see an honest to goodness attempt of being that wellness partner. Again, a digital tool and app is fine, but I don't know how many apps you have in your phone. I probably have like 60.
I don't know how many I actually use, but
yes.
okay.
Well, exactly. And so let's just be honest about what is actually going to work and what's not.
I think in Singapore, I think the government does a lot in terms of the preventative side of things. I think I know that on the life insurance side, they work very closely with the Ministry of Health. I think in terms of from a genetics testing perspective and all that. So I think there's a lot happening. I think in Singapore, I think we're very lucky in terms of that support that's available here. Let's move into mental well-being. It's especially after COVID, I think it was front and center. Before that, it was a little bit taboo to talk about it, but I think it's become a little bit more easier to talk about it. In terms of long-term, I think mental health was always treated as secondary compared to physical health. And, it's even separate from mainstream health, but today that's changing. So, Sejal, from your point of view, right, how has that become such a defining issue in the future of health and well-being?
Yeah, I think you touched upon many of the points that I would have raised anyway, is that I think COVID was really that aha moment, or that wake-up call, I should say, that people's mental health has been long unaddressed, and it matters. And it matters for them as individuals, and matters how they function in family and in work. And there was a real economic fallout from that. And what I think is that I've been hearing a lot more about mental health. I still wonder if I'm seeing the actions that go along with it. And I don't want to put this all on the insurers. I think, like you said, actually Singapore does a great job in a lot of different, activities, wellness activities, things that they do for the community. But again, to me, it is, what are you going to do besides talking about it? Are you going to cover it? I was doing a little bit of reading, and I saw that in some countries in Europe, US and Europe, they look at, I forgot what the term was, something about parity.
Okay.
And so they treat the reimbursement for mental health issues the same as physical health.
Oh.
So the same number of visits. And so it's not seen as secondary, it's not seen as peripheral, but a core benefit. And so I think that, yes, there is more of a conversation that needs to happen on mental health and well-being. But I think we need to now figure out how to actually make this alive and something that people feel like is there, feel like they will be covered. And, I haven't even addressed the stigma issue. I think the workplace is a great place to start.
Yeah. So, Hsien, I think from a corporate standpoint, right, what still needs to change? I mean, I remember in our company during COVID, we gave access to a digital mental health app. And, so everybody was very excited. They were talking to their mental health sort of like specialists on the app. You can chat with them. They'll do check-ins. But after a while, that it didn't happen. The take-up was getting lower and lower. So I mean, what is it? Is it because the employer is providing? So we tried asking them, do you want it, not want it? I don't know what's going on, So, I mean, do you have answers as to what we should be doing from a business lens?
If I'd had answers, we would all be so happy. We wouldn't be sitting in this room. No. Yeah, mental health is so complicated because it's unseen.
Yeah.
I think even for physicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, how do they get inside your head, right? Unlike physical illnesses where you can have lab results, you can measure, mental health is just such a difficult subject. And it is really broad because one of the topics that we have been talking about in the workplace even more frequently is neurodivergence.
Oh.
And with neurodivergence actually comes with the comorbidity of various mental health illnesses. For example, mental health illnesses, that was, didn't make a lot of sense, but you guys know what I'm talking about. When you have comorbidities like depression that comes with ADHD or being on the spectrum, like all sorts of it's so complicated to try to unravel. So in the workplace, what would be the first step that a company could take to support their employees? I think number one is creating the right environment. And that is not just like having a great boss, which is already hard enough to achieve, hey? It's about creating a work environment where it accommodates people's need to maybe have a quiet corner. One of the issues in the workplace we have now is that there are some offices that are hot desking and whatnot, and it's so dang noisy all the time. And I have to admit, I'm one of the noisemakers. So it doesn't bother me that much. But for other people, they need some quiet. So creating the right environment, number one, both the physical environment as well as a psychologically safe environment is probably more important than anything you could do like a digital app, honestly. Because if you're not in the right environment, how do you expect me to even function and log into some dang app and access whatever help I need? I can't even deal with being in this space.
Okay.
On the digital tools part, I think what's getting really exciting is the AI part of it and how people are engaging with AI. So I'm just going to get real personal here and I'm going to out myself. So at times when I'm feeling stressed or uncertain, I'm a mother of two, I'm a wife, I'm a colleague, I'm a boss. I have been experimenting with AI. And you have probably read of people who rely on AI so much that they may have done something that was unwise or they've decided they want to marry their AI spouse. Okay, so this is the new frontier. But I'll tell you in my experimentation, and being someone who is, fairly well-versed in public health and healthcare, I've been very impressed. Why? Because when you're experiencing anxiety, actually, a real human doesn't want to hear about it from you, right?
So true.
You're complaining to your colleague, your friend, and after some point, they're like tired of it.
Yeah.
And they're like, get your act together. You are really complaining a lot.
I've got my own issues as well.
And so there's this quid pro quo thing, but AI doesn't have a quid pro quo. I can tell AI I'm totally stressed about this, and I can kind of go on and get in a loop about it. AI will consistently continue to give you positive feedback and suggestions. You can tell it, I think this is a dumb idea. I'm certainly not going to do that, right? Or stop addressing it in this way, and they don't get offended. So I do think when it comes to digital tools, we're going to see an evolution, a revolution, in fact, of the kind of tools that are being offered to us. We know of companies like our good friend Christina at Hey Venus.
Yes.
She's developing an AI-powered platform where you can drop in, I'm feeling really tired today.
Yeah.
Maybe I forgot to take my progesterone because I'm a menopausal woman. I can't remember if I did this. What should I do? And you can continue to have this conversation. I think workplaces, we're already talking about implementing AI into the workflow. Let's talk about implementing AI support in preventive health as well.
Very good. I think we are partnering with Hey Venus, Christina, and the work that they're doing, and so I think we're trying it out for our women folk as well as for all our gentlemen in the office, for their spouses or mothers, sisters, whatever they want. So we're trying it out. We thought it's a good thing to do to support women health through this journey, and we're looking forward to see how that goes ahead. And I think it's exciting times, but to your point about the AI companion, a dog also works really well.
I love cats myself.
He doesn't talk back. They are wonderful companions.
But they are also very needy, which causes another level of stress for me.
And a bit expensive as well. Yes, you're right. Okay, but such amazing companions. Okay, we're moving from a world where mental health was treated as an optional add-on, and now it's essential. Yes. So let's quickly just move on to a little bit about trust and data. I think you spoke about it a little bit, right? So now as we move towards a sort of like a proactive stance and more personalized, Shen, which you mentioned as well, more data enabled. The key tension that emerges is trust. Yeah. So now once insurers start engaging more deeply with behaviors, health journeys, even mental well-being, people will naturally ask, how is my data being used? So I think we talked about genetic testing. So there's a moratorium in place that insurers don't use results of your genetics testings, right? So your results. And so where are those boundaries and who is this really serving, right? So Sejal, from your strategy and governance perspective, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. And we've seen versions of this for a long time when it comes to health data sharing of electronic medical records, even trust between different healthcare providers, public and private. And then we have the insurance element. And I think health, probably like your banking data, is some of the most sensitive data. People feel very wary, and rightly so, about sharing it. On the other hand, the promise of AI and all these digital tools is predicated on having access to those data sets. I think, the couple of challenges that I see is that people want to be able to benefit from the better decisions and the better outcomes. But I think having this go to your insurance company, the question automatically arises is that how is this going to be used against me? If you're in the business of underwriting and you want to assess, and this is what insurance companies are built to do, assess the risks. And, normally this is done through questionnaires. You have to rely on the patient's word or maybe some basic files. But if the patient doesn't even know the risk, then somehow in there, what measures are you going to put in place to say, look, we're not going to use this against you? This could be for genomic testing, it could be for mental health as well. You had talked earlier about why people might not want to share their mental health, or use a mental health platform provided by the employers. It's funny, my employer did that too, and they're wonderful. And I remember thinking to myself, do I want to use this? Because how do I know that if I say I have depression or I have an issue,
would it go back?
This is going to go back, and it's going to go back, and is she really an employee that we want? In the same way, is this what an insurer is going to say? Do we really want this policy holder? So I think we need to really figure out what are those guardrails and measures to do it. But I think we are at a point, especially with AI, where we can't not have access to data, and have data come together. I think now we get into really discussions about data sharing frameworks between providers, governments, insurance companies. I know that there have been some models tested in different settings, but I haven't seen it really taken up on a national scale because of the wariness that people have. We haven't even talked about cybersecurity breaches.
Oh, yes, that's true. And I think that's quite real as well, right? Yeah. But I know that there are a lot of conversations happening, I think, within the industry, together with the Ministry of Health and all the relevant stakeholders on this, right? Because we want to have healthier people, because if people are living longer, you can't afford, it doesn't make business sense for the industry as well, for people to not be healthy. So it makes sense for them to do that. But to do that, I think you do this well with data, but I think that's what the industry is currently in conversation with. Shen, from your standpoint, right, how can we look at it from, to build employee trust? How do we make sure that the technology and data can be more embedded in the health and well-being system, so that we do not lose that human touch? I mean, what can we do?
I should probably add that a few years ago, there was a survey specifically about the use of genetic data. in terms of developing new therapies or making insurance decisions, for example. And I think, if I recall, this was done in Singapore. And what the survey respondents said was, I don't mind if you use my data to develop new treatments. That's a good thing because people will benefit. The challenge is when you're making money off of my data. Well, what benefit is it to me? So I think that's the money conversation comes into it, right? I trust you to do the right thing. However, if you're making money off of it, how does that change what you decide to do with my data? And so I think a lot of it is around transparency, helping people understand that when businesses or government want to use your data, that number one, it would be anonymized so that it cannot be traced back to you.
Correct.
Number two, that it's going to be used for the greater good. And if you're going to make money off of it, okay, I understand you need to run a business and you need to be able to do these things. However, what percentage of it are you then going to give back to society? Right? I think that people generally want to do good. And if you can do it on my behalf using my data, I'm also okay with it as long as you're very clear about what you're planning to do with it.
Okay.
So on the trust part too, I think we're now currently talking about a very narrow focus on trust. Trust is not built in a narrow, in a silo. It's not built specifically about health data.
That's true.
Or about your financial data. Trust is built on a society level. And that's why we see in Singapore that during the pandemic, for example, that Singaporeans had so much trust in their government because Singapore had built that trust over the years. Yeah. They're now 61 years old. It took decades to build that trust. And the first 10 or 20 years, that was not easy. But for the government to have demonstrated time and time again that they will help people and take care of them, that's where the trust is built. So now when you're talking about sequencing the genomes of Singaporeans, they're not so scared about what you're going to do because you have shown me through the moratorium on the use of genetic data for insurance purposes and other things that you have done in society that data will be used responsibly. So I think when we talk about trust, it's actually a much bigger issue than simply about healthcare. Because if you're in a society where people don't even trust their next door neighbors, I mean, why would I trust you with any of my data? I'm just going to keep it all to myself, even though I know that data is valuable and could help me. I just don't trust you.
Well, and I think this also goes back to the earlier comment or the image that you painted for us with the Incredibles, where insurance companies are there to deny.
And we had this conversation in our last ASEAN meeting, right?
And in fact, I mean, this is exactly it, where people say, okay, yeah, I trust that my data will be used for the greater good. I want to contribute, but do I want my insurance company? Their goal is to find a way to deny coverage. And now they're going to use my data to do that. And so I think for an insurance company, there is a lot more work to be done on fixing that foundational perception.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. And I think there's a lot of work that's being done in that space. So I think what we're also doing is how do we become, as to your point, Hsien, about being more transparent. So I think we understand that, the insurance business is a little bit complex. It's not easy to understand what goes on behind. So I think what we're trying to do is sort of like lift the veil a little bit, in terms of, okay, so we're using data from claims, for example, to tell you, okay, what should you be doing if something happens? So, like telling you about travel insurance. What does it cover? Do you know what it covers and what it doesn't cover? Because sometimes we don't read the fine prints, right? So, and there are a lot of fine prints to read through. So if it's personal accident, what does it cover? What doesn't it cover? What should you be doing, for business insurance, for example? What do you need? So I think getting more transparent about the way in which insurance is done is something that I think all insurers are doing. We're also trying to educate people from younger, because I think if we can socialize people with insurance, they start learning about risk and resilience, because managing your risk is not only your insurer's job. You buy a policy and you think you don't need to be safe, or you don't. It doesn't work that way, right? It's something that we have to do together. So I think educating people about it and us telling that story or creating greater awareness about what makes insurance work, how do claims function, how do the different products work. I think we recently did a podcast on investment-linked product. Again, a product that's very much misunderstood at times, So, but I think going out there, speaking about it, being transparent about it, I think is what's going to help. Now, let's turn to a very important topic to everyone here, women's health. Okay, let's get into that a little bit, right? So across the region, we're seeing a growing recognition about women's health in terms of how important it is for the workforce well-being, prevention, long-term resilience. So from whether it's reproductive health, whether it's maternal well-being, menopausal care, menopausal health, everything, preventive care, and we are starting to see organizations look at it in a more holistic and meaningful manner. But like Sejal, I know you mentioned this quite a bit. From your lens, how is that conversation around women's health evolving?
Look, I think, again, like the conversation on prevention, I'm so happy that women's health is not just about us making babies.
Oh my God, yes.
So this is already...
We need to do that too, apparently.
Yeah, we do need to do that. But I think, and this is what's often, even in public health terms, we always talk about maternal and child health. So it's the woman as a vessel or as a caretaker.
That's so true.
And to me, like, finally, we're at a stage, yes, all of this is important. Our reproductive organs are important, what happens before and after, et cetera. But like, we could now talk about cardiovascular disease and the differential risk factors that women face.
Yes.
We can talk about, I'm sure the mental health burden is different, and the way that you approach healthcare can also be different. I think the other thing is also, I think by addressing women's health very meaningfully in a way that women want it and are seen, and feel cared for, that's going to also have positive dividends for any insurance or any party that's trying to do this. Because at the end of the day, most women are those healthcare decision makers in their family. They are the ones that are taking their kids to the doctor, maybe pushing a spouse to go and get that appointment. And so I think there's even an opportunity when people understand, when businesses understand that there is a key segment of women as, of course, patients themselves, but women as decision makers for that family. So again, I think I'm really happy the direction where it's going. But I'm going to keep going back to my refrain is you got to put your money where your mouth is. Are we covering women across that journey along her life? Whether it's reproductive health, perimenopause, menopause. I was actually talking to my daughter about it last night, and she told me, don't forget puberty.
Oh.
So she's 12 years old, and she feels like no one ever talks about it. I think we all like, yes.
Maybe
I think in high school.
Previously we used to.
Or maybe you don't think about it as a healthcare system.
They're born smart. I don't know. You think they understand it. I don't know. So, okay.
But,
did you have the birds and bees conversation or whatever?
No,
Do you
as an
want
Asian, my parents avoided those kind
There's
of
no
conversations.
birds and bees in this house.
Exactly.
Oh, so sad.
No.
But the point being is that there is a very specific journey, and I think there is some argument that even for men, there probably needs to be some tailored look at how men, go along their healthcare journey, especially men who are often reluctant to access healthcare services. But yeah, this is I'm happy to see these changes happening.
Very good. I was watching there was a screening. I don't know, Hsien, whether you went in. Sejal, I think I told you about it. The M Factor.
Yep.
Oh my God. So the Oslo Health, I think they did this screening of the M Factor, and I was just watching the document. Oh my God. I realized I don't know anything about this whole journey. There's so much to know, the 5 important vitamins that you should be taking, and how women suffer from, like brain fog, and all the different symptoms.
Real.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
This goldfish brain. So it's like all the list of symptoms that they talk about for women's health. And I was like, oh my God, all this is related and we don't realize. And sometimes women feel that they are going crazy, and they instead sadly decide to drop out of work life, of working, right? And when you drop out, you lose that career trajectory, and you're halfway in,
We're losing the productivity that we bring to the economy.
Yes, exactly. So, I think that's where Christina shared through Hey Venus and the work that they're doing in the research, and how they talk about, supporting women's health makes business sense because you see improved productivity, less lost man days, So how do we get that conversation going? So I think to you, Hsien, from your vantage point, right, working closely with business leaders, wider corporate community. Now, how are organizations, whether in Singapore, across the region, how are they thinking differently that you see about women's health? Yes.
There have been some improvements, I think. Companies now will make sure that they sign up for insurance that covers things like menopause. I think menopause coverage is starting to become a thing. On the treatment side of things, for many, many years, there was a study that came out some years ago that scared everyone off of hormone replacement therapy.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, that data did not prove to be correct. And we are now understanding more that hormone replacement therapy is incredibly important. It's actually being renamed to menopause therapy so that it's even more direct.
Okay.
And there are drugs now being approved specifically to help with the symptoms of menopause because, as you rightly pointed out, Shalini, a ton of symptoms are related to the fact that we are no longer producing estrogen. I also had no idea, for example, that muscle ache and joint pain was part of that list.
Sleepless nights, sweating at night. Who knew all these symptoms existed? Oh my God, pity us. How do we even function? I don't know.
I'm trying to explain to my coworkers that I will be sitting at the desk and say, what am I doing? What am I here for? Who am I?
The notes.
Well, I don't know. Who am I is more of an existential question.
It is existential.
And I know this friend of mine was telling me she's in a boardroom and suddenly it's the aircon's on, everybody is okay, and she has to take out the fan and start fanning because you're like internally combusting.
Yes, awful. It's true. I think companies are starting to have those conversations. There are some very progressive organizations. I believe, well, I won't name in case I get it wrong, but there are many companies who are having that conversation, supporting women. What's most important is that women at their peak in their career is when they start to experience perimenopause and menopause symptoms.
Yes.
So to lose them is really a shame because we are losing their knowledge, we are losing their productivity on a more practical level. So companies now are starting to recognize we can't afford to lose these women leaders. So we have to make sure that we provide the insurance coverage so that they don't have to pay out of pocket for so many of the variety of treatments that are now available to us. Maybe before, when we were all scared to take hormone replacement therapy, there was no real cost involved. Because what are you going to do? Buy another set of clothes that are like more cooling? Well, companies are going to pay for your clothes. But they do have a responsibility to make sure you are receiving the right medical care. And in that case, the insurance part comes in. Companies also now are thinking about how to drive that conversation and awareness among both the women and the men.
Exactly.
And so if we're not scared to talk about these subjects, then we are able to better understand each other. We can also open up conversations about other women's health issues besides menopause, such as bacterial vaginosis. I had a conversation yesterday with one of our member companies.
It's not an easy conversation to have, but important.
But it bugs you every single day.
Yes.
And people, there is actually a treatment for it, but you're always getting the wrong thing. And so it's just an example of the many things that people are confronted with daily, men and women, that they don't have anybody to talk to, are not receiving the right treatment. So companies can actually find a way to open that door. Like we said before, you can actually bring in a sexual health expert into the office to have this conversation. And it's just part of, 30, 40 people in the room, I'm just here to learn. You don't have to confess to anything if you're not comfortable. But you also then know you have people who you can talk to about it. And if the company sees that there's interest, as with any insurance, right? If there's interest, there will be better coverage. If you're silent about it, there will never be any coverage.
Exactly.
So you better start to have this conversation in a safe space. And hopefully your workplace is a safe place for you to be exploring this.
Yeah. And you're so right, Hsien. I think educating people, right? Sometimes until I watched that documentary, I didn't even know these symptoms, right? And I thought I'd read quite a bit about it, but clearly not, right? So Christina from Hey Venus leads this cross-sector menopause task force, and we have 2 work groups right now. So one is to come up with the playbook of how to help employers, right, in this women's health journey. And I think I'm in the work group that's about workplace readiness. So I think talking about it, preparing people for it, and for example, what is that conversation as a manager I need to have with my staff about how to manage it? And you're right, it's not just about women folk. You also need to educate the men in the organization, right? So it's everyone together. But at the end of the day, it's better outcomes for everybody. I think that's what's really important. And I'm glad that, it's becoming more visible. And you're right, we have to keep talking about it. We have to keep bringing it up. Okay, rapid fire. We're going to quickly move. Okay, so
rapid can you be, Sejal?
Sejal's, I speak like a bullet train. Sejal is cool, calm, and collected, okay?
My brain works a little bit slower. I'll blame it on the brain fog.
Okay, so let's move to that, right? So, to both of y'all, right? One word.
Oh, is it like a competition who
Oh
to
my
say
God,
who
there's
can
no
say it
competition.
first? Oh, okay, just checking.
No, we will start with one person and move to the next, okay? All right, one word you hope defines the future of health insurance. Sejal, let's start with you.
Value.
Oh.
Yeah, you have to put your money where your mouth is. demonstrate value to the policyholders, to the patients, and just to the healthcare ecosystem. You're no longer a financial instrument. You're a valued partner in this journey.
Very good. Shen?
Caring.
Okay.
I would like people to view insurance as something that cares about you as a whole person, not just about whatever current diagnosis you have.
Very true. I think that's what the insurers talk about as well. The whole person is an important part. Okay, to both of you. So one health or well-being issue that you think will matter in the next 5 years. Shen, you want to kick us off?
I would love to say women's health. However, we've kind of explored that. So I'll introduce something else, which is around infectious disease.
Oh,
You took my answer.
oh,
You took
No,
my answer.
that's because we're public health
Yeah,
people.
so you're a public
Right?
health
And
people.
also,
Yes,
we're
you're
coming
right,
out
you're
of the
right.
pandemic.
Yes.
We need to do a
Yes,
better
oh my
job
gosh.
of doing surveillance about emerging
I
diseases.
see, okay.
There are a lot of, because pandemic and other diseases come out of what we say interaction between animal and human, right? And that is something that's not currently being studied very carefully because a lot of it is about borders, country borders.
That's
Do I
true.
know what's going on in that country? Will they share that information with me? And some of that is also tied into genomic surveillance. So there's a new company that's being formed that takes a look at the non-human genomes as a way to
Oh.
think about biosecurity and surveillance. So I do think infectious disease, unfortunately, we think of it as a developing country issue. It is not. We are going to be affected and it's going to be dramatic.
Okay.
I love that we were on the same plane there because I said, I know this is going to feel like completely off the wall, but I think that's exactly it, is that also on top of it, you have to think about the vaccine hesitancy. We're having
Yes.
measles
gosh,
outbreaks.
Yes.
And then when you bring in climate, you have dengue in places that have never been there
Correct.
before. So all these, we thought we had won sort of the war, at least in the developed world, on infectious diseases. COVID proved us wrong. And I think, again, people are forgetting, oh, yeah, this COVID thing, whatever, that was just a fluke. No, the conditions are still there and they're still increasing. So everything that Hsien said, and I think as public health people, we see the writing on the wall. We see things that other people don't.
What should people be doing right now? Whether it's corporates or government, what do you think?
Well, if we've learned anything, business continuity planning is important.
Okay. Yes.
And I think many companies did not have that in place because why would we, right? But if we are scanning the horizon for potential risks, this has to be one of them. And chronic disease is more of a slow burning type of issue that we can manage a little bit more easily. The infectious disease part has to be built into every business continuity plan.
Okay. I'm
So-
glad we did it. Yes.
On the insurance front, I mean, there are players that are looking at or already putting forth pandemic insurance. I think there's a parametric insurance that was
Yes.
launched in India. And I think this is kind of untested, territory. I feel like it's probably closest to NatCat in terms of
okay.
the types of products that we're looking at. But I think there is a role for the insurance community in whether it's at scale, at population level, if we have another pandemic or an outbreak. But we need to think about who do we insure in these situations. In the case of the insurance I'm talking about, they went to, I think the first buyers were basically the tourism and hospitality
That's
industry.
true, yeah.
Because of the business continuity.
Yeah. So I think there's a business interruption risk.
Yes.
I think that they cover women's health. Okay. In one aspect of women's health that you think deserves better or more attention in the wider well-being conversation, what do you think that is?
I'm going to be very selfish, and maybe it's just me, but migraines.
Oh my God, I know,
man.
Sejal. You talk about it. I told you Sake helps.
Yes. No, because it is actually, first of all, I put it within women's health because when I had started experiencing, I read that a lot of it is passed sort of on the maternal line, and
Is it?
women
Oh.
experience it more than men. And I think going back to our conversations on mental health or even migraine, it's very physical, but it's kind of seen like, oh, you got a headache. And I think bringing conversations about migraines at home or in the workplace, how it affects women in particular, would be something I'd love to see and champion.
Very good. Shen?
Yeah, in women's health, there have been a lot of successes, right? On the business, on the breast cancer, the ovarian cancer front, we've had a lot of conversations. There's now a genetic test that's being made widely available. So there have been successes in talking about conditions that affect only women that people might have found a little sensitive before. Oh my gosh, we're going to talk about breasts. But I was speaking to some friends yesterday at DKSH, and they were saying lower genital urinary conditions and sexual health are also it affects women tremendously is not talked about because there's a lot of sensitivities around it. And that's why I mentioned bacterial
Is it in
vaginosis.
Asia alone, that sensitivity? Or
It's
you think
across, it's around the world.
Really?
Another thing to think about is that traditionally, why we don't talk about men's health in the same way is because men have been included in clinical trials
Yes.
for
the
so
longest
long,
time,
but
yeah.
women, it's like, oh no, we can't include them because they have a reproductive tract, right? They might
Yes.
have, they might be pregnant. They're going to have babies. We cannot include them in any clinical trials. And so women are just completely not included. We don't know what treatments are good for us. On top of which, we have very specific needs that are also not discussed that people find very embarrassing to talk about.
But it's
And-
changing,
yeah.
right, Shen? Today, do you
I
see
think-
that? Or is it slow progress?
I think it's pretty slow, partly because the science isn't always enough. Like I said, the clinical trials haven't included women in the past. Maybe some therapies have just not been developed because of fear, like hormone replacement therapy. We have a lot of work to do in women's health, especially what we think is embarrassing to talk about.
All right. AI. All right. So let's talk about AI. One area that you think AI could genuinely improve health and well-being outcomes. I know we talked about the AI companion. Besides AI companion, anything else? Sejal, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like AI in health is like some of the first use cases of where AI has been really powerful. For me, I would say patient empowerment. I think now, like if you are able to also understand using AI tools more about your own data, and I know that people are now putting in their results and sort of saying, help me understand
Oh,
this.
yes.
Doctors don't spend much time with their patients, and patients, there's this huge information asymmetry. I think there is a risk that people, like how we used to talk about Google Doctor, I'm sure there's AI Doctor, and the people might think they know more than they actually do. But I actually think that this might be a way to empower people to really understand their own health and their healthcare needs.
And better conversations, I think, with your doctor, right?
Absolutely.
In a way, yes.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea that we can use AI to detect patterns in our own data because it's just so hard to understand a lot of the jargon. The other thing I want to maybe point out is that AI can really help us maybe have actually better treatments. On the drug discovery front, on the therapy front, if we are willing, going back to the trust conversation, to share the data that we have. If I've been prescribed a new type of medication for, say, cholesterol, right? I just received a combination drug and I don't really know if it's working well. So I release my data into the greater good, the greater data pool, and that then leads to even better ideas about what other drug combinations could be useful. I think that we are going to see a lot of breakthroughs in drug discovery. Google DeepMind is already working on that. There's been a better understanding about protein folding that's also going to lead to better therapies. So I'm really excited to see what it's going to bring on the frontier of research and development.
Okay, so now let's look at workplace well-being, right? What issue do you think leaders are underestimating today?
I hesitate because I think we've covered it. I still think it's mental health.
Okay, all right. Jen?
Yeah, I think mental health, the neurodivergence piece has received some degree of coverage. Maybe even insurance, honestly, to go back to the main premise of what we're talking about today. I think we all take it for granted that we get some level of insurance coverage. How many people really know what they're covered for?
Very true.
And I don't think people are necessarily optimizing for what they could be having access to. And some things are like, ew, I don't want that. And so helping people understand insurance and the workplace it's probably not as easy of a task. We think when people are being onboarded as a new employee, you show them their insurance coverage. I am terrible. I can barely remember what limb you're supposed to lose to get coverage.
What
Do you know
limb?
what I mean? It's like, oh, is it below the elbow or is it above the elbow?
my
I remember
goodness.
that because it was so like, whoa. But that whole insurance conversation within a workplace really deserves some kind of continuous, it's almost like continuous learning, because it's complicated and it's scary and it's intimidating. And when I need it, I don't know what I have. Maybe, again, AI can help me with that. If there's some internal tool or that insurance company, I can type into AI, I think I can claim for this. What exactly can I do?
Actually,
Okay.
this is happening.
That's a good one, yeah.
Because a friend of mine is doing that now. He puts his policy into a
Yes,
chat.
actually, a lot of
That's a
people do
really
that.
good idea.
Explain
And
it to
then
me.
I need to
What's
do
covered,
that.
what's excluded.
Exactly.
Yes, correct.
Oh, that's so good.
Yes,
very
yes,
smart.
very true. And I think there's a lot of opportunities as well. If you look at, I think insurers today are getting more creative. I'm thinking about the policy I bought when I first started working in the 90s. and the kind of policies and coverages that are available today. Oh my goodness, this, so much has changed. So if you're not looking at what you're covered for, or as employers explaining to employees what's happening and continuously looking, what more, what other coverages that we could, it's very, very important. Both great points. We have actually finished. I can't imagine that we've covered quite a bit. I think we are almost at the tail end of it. I just want to let you have any last thoughts, anything that you want to just get it out today. Sejal, Hsien, anything?
I think this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for having me. For me, I think we need to keep having these kind of conversations. And I think the more, from an insurance standpoint, you can reach across the table to talk to health providers, to talk to governments, to talk to patients even. I think we will have more of that honest discussions, the clarity. And that's, I think, to me, the foundation of trust.
Very good. Hsien.
I want to build on this part about discussion. So Shalini, as you were wrapping up, I started thinking, well, when there are all these different product offerings from the insurers, how do they know that what they are actually coming up with is something people want? Which means that they're definitely doing some type of market survey and feedback. So I want to know, as a consumer, what's the best way for me to get my feedback across?
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
So I would like to think that there is some mechanism. I have no idea. Honestly, just myself, I'm like, I would like coverage for this, but how am I supposed to go about telling them? And how do we then aggregate demand so the insurers are developing the right products and then I'm selecting the right one for myself? All of that is just intimidating.
But, I think you can send it up to the associations who aggregate this information and can share that down to the members. I think whether it's a life insurance association or general insurance association, if you've got an agent, route it through the agent. If you've got a broker for businesses, I think that's a good place because brokers also work to customize coverage for businesses. So I think channeling that feedback through brokers as well is an excellent way. And then they work with the insurers, right? So if there's no product that's available, how can they design a product that works for the business, right? So I think that's something that conversation, that platform is available. But if it's not clear, I'm just letting you know. But, we welcome the feedback because as we see, I think when I started working, I can't remember whether it was critical illness, there was like maybe 30 critical illness. Today, you're like 60, 90. I think today, I don't know
I've
whether
seen 200.
I think I saw 120.
Yeah.
You're like, it's evolved, and it's evolved because with the science evolving, the medical health evolving, consumers coming up and telling us what needs to happen. I think that's really made it clear. But, that feedback I think is really welcome. So I think we're really clear today. I think that conversations need to continue, and I'm glad that the conversations are not happening on the sidelines and it's coming up front and center. I think it's again, the conversations on health and well-being is people are a lot more aware. I think we were just having this conversation recently, about what is the point of having great shoes or clothes or bags or whatever, and then you're like, and you're not healthy. What is that point, right? At the end of the day, once you lose health, nothing else matters, right? So I think this conversation is so important, and I'm glad we're having more of these conversations. So again, Sejal, Hsien, it's really wonderful to have you on the podcast, and we hope that we can continue these conversations, whether outside, inside, with coffee, with cocktails, I don't know, with whatever, Yes.
I'd like to do it over pickleball. Sejal knows I'm completely addicted to pickleball.
Are you? Oh my God. I have never tried, but I'm willing to try.
You are invited.
She's going to rope you in. She's going to rope you in.
Are you very good at it?
No,
She's good.
I love to include people. It's a very inclusive sport.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
You can be my partner.
Oh, okay.
Pickleball people,
wait,
pickleball.
Are you good at it? I'm quite
terrible,
sure.
but it's
my
It's
friends are
just
going
fun.
to kill me. They're like, why must you bring pickleball to every conversation?
You managed to bring it in
health
at
and
the end.
well-being. Health and well-being.
Okay, but you're right.
It is.
It is.
It's
We're
a
talking
blue
about
zone
well-being.
sport,
Sorry?
It's a blue zone sport.
What is a blue zone?
Blue Zone, Netflix show about the blue zones where
Oh.
people live a long time, healthy
I
longevity,
see.
active aging. Loma Linda, California is
Okay.
a blue zone, only 5 in the world. Singapore is kind of like the 6,
Okay.
but they play a lot of pickleball in Loma
Is
Linda.
it the hitting of the ball? You get
It
off
is
a lot
the
of...
mental thing. It is a social thing. It's
I
everything.
see.
So you are going to join us next time, right?
Count me in.
Okay.
Wait, can I wear something nice? Like, okay, never
You can
mind.
wear whatever you want, girl.
Cute outfit.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you again, Sejal. Thank you, Hsien, for making time to be here. To our listeners, again, if this conversation sparked ideas, we hope you will continue to take this forward. Again, we at the Singapore College of Insurance, we try to bring conversations from different areas of insurance, not just for insurance professionals within the industry to get to know different parts of the business, but also for people outside the business to understand a little bit about what we do here in insurance. And it's part of being transparent and building trust and staying open to change. So again, if you found this episode useful or you enjoyed it, especially with Sejal and Hsien and stories about pickleball, maybe next time we'll talk about just sports. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and do follow and subscribe. And again, thank you again for being here. We hope to see you at the next episode. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Sejal. Thank you, Hsien.